Thank you for tuning in to the Practical Preservation Podcast. Please take a moment to visit our website, practicalpreservationservices.com, for additional information and tips to help you restore your historical home. If you've not done so, please subscribe to us on iTunes, Stitcher, or SoundCloud, and also like us on Facebook. Welcome to the Practical Preservation Podcast, hosted by Danielle and Jonathan Kepperling. Kepperling Preservation Services is a family-owned business based in Lancaster, Pennsylvania, dedicated to the preservation of our built architectural history for today's use as well as future generations. Our weekly podcast provides you with expert advice specific to the unique needs of renovating a historic home, educating by sharing our From the Trenches preservation knowledge and our guests' expertise, balancing modern needs while maintaining the historical significance, character, and beauty of your period home.
Today on the Practical Preservation Podcast, we have Rabbit Goody with us from Thistle Hill Weavers. Thank you for joining us, Rabbit.
I'm glad to be here.
So tell me a little bit about your background.
So I started my academic background as an anthropologist. And professionally, I've been involved in the museum field, mostly historic museums, living history museums. But my weaving career really started when I was a teenager, and it comes from the point of being one of the original hippies and wanting to build my own house, grow my own food, and make my own clothing, all of which I've done. But once I started spinning, it was something that was not only a passion, but was innately in my DNA. I knew how to weave. I knew how to spin. Nobody had to teach me. Very strange.
That's interesting, but I could see that need or that desire to want to create things. Then that's really down to the basics of, this is what you need to make fabric. These are
Right.
the things that you need to be able to do. So
Right.
So you worked for living history museums, and then at some point, I guess you decided to go out on your own and actually be a weaver.
Yeah, and actually I bounced back and forth.
Okay.
I left Mystic Seaport, and after I'd gotten my degree in anthropology, I started a small weaving company in which I was a hand weaver, and
Okay.
I was making cashmere and silk scarves for the New York accessory trade, mostly the men's trade. And I was very successful, but two things. One, there's a limit to how much one can weave by hand
Right.
and
Yeah.
make a living. I made a good living, but my body wasn't going to last forever doing that.
Right. And
But
you only have
also
so many hours.
right, and it didn't hit the historic and intellectual part of the pursuit as much. So I went back into the museum field. I'm not really wonderful at working inside of an institution all the time. Um, I was the curator of domestic arts. I was the textile curator for a while. But I saw a need for the ability to produce fabrics for museums. And I also love machinery. So it was at that point that I started buying up used equipment from mills that were going out of business. So what we
Right.
run in our weaving business are looms that were being junked
Right.
from mills in the South. I hauled them up here and I repurposed them. So my husband calls what we do heavy metal weaving um, because they are big pieces of iron.
Right.
And they are able to produce the historic textiles in a very similar way to producing them by hand, and
Okay.
yet much more efficiently.
Right. And these were machines that people were getting rid of because they were getting out of the textile business because
Textile business in America was
Right.
really moving
Yeah.
elsewhere.
Yeah.
It moved from New England to the South, to India, to China, to elsewhere.
Right. Yeah.
So these were just pieces of junk. It
Yeah.
cost me more to bring them up here and set them up.
Oh, I'm
than it did
sure.
to buy them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, well, I think that's also, um, you're also keeping not just the patterns and things alive, you're keeping that American made, manufacturing also.
Very important to me. It's a trade that is really important, that should never have completely left America. And it hasn't. I mean, there are still mills in the United States, but
right.
none,
But
none that run antique equipment like we do. Yeah.
So, okay. So what types of products do you offer?
So because we're custom and commission,
Mm-hmm.
we get to do almost everything that can be flat woven. So most of what we like to produce are historic interior furnishing fabrics. So upholstery fabrics, drapery fabrics, carpeting in the historic vein. But we also do something that's, again, unique. We do short runs. So we're able to do as little as 20 yards of a fabric. So we work with a lot of modern designers who are interested in sustainability. So we work with some clothing designers. We work with people who are trying to develop a new sustainable fabric.
Okay.
And it doesn't matter to us. We don't put out anything in under our own name as a line of anything.
Right.
Our custom and commission. We also work for a lot of sheep farmers and alpaca farmers who have wool and alpaca. They get it spun, and then we weave something out of it as a value added product that they can sell to make money farming.
Right.
So we'll do just about anything we're capable of. We're expensive though.
Right. No, I that completely makes sense to me. The sustainable fabrics kind of stuck out to me. Is that where you're trying to like the bamboos and things that you can see commercially, or is it something more cutting edge?
Sometimes it's more cutting edge,
Okay.
but there was a big move away from a cotton because of the amount of water and pesticides. So
Right.
tencel, bamboo, the other cellulosic rayons. But sometimes we're asked to do really cutting edge work in fibers that people are just beginning to develop. And the real issue for me is that the most sustainable fibers are really wool and alpaca.
Oh yeah.
Historically, wool did some incredible things. People don't understand in the historic setting that wool drapery filtered the air. Wool carpets balanced the temperature and the humidity in a historic house. So just getting people to even think along those lines.
Right. More natural fabrics. Yeah.
And we've always worked in natural fibers. So it was no leap for us to, get further and further into that. But we also work with synthetics.
Right. Well, and that makes sense to me just from the standpoint of, when you look at an entire older building, typically they're built so that you utilize the natural ventilation, and they understood how all the systems work together. So that makes sense to me that they understood that about the wool too.
Absolutely. And wool carpeting, you can't do better.
No. So do you want to talk to me about your process now, or do you want to talk about that a little bit later?
We can talk about it now.
Okay, sure.
Sure. So when a homeowner specifically or a architectural firm gets in touch with us, we can do everything from the research to creating fabric samples and then making appropriate fabrics and trims. We do passementerie that goes with our fabrics.
Okay.
We can do trims, we can do tiebacks, we can do construction. So we'll actually construct window treatments, and then we will do installation. Just sort of depends on, but any place along the process that somebody wants to be, we're happy to work with them. If they only want us to weave a fabric that they have a piece of, and they say, here's the fabric, I just want this, I want it in this color, if we can do it, we will. But if somebody comes to us and says, I have an 1820 house that is moderate, what should I do with the window treatments for this room? We'll do the research for that area. We'll do inventory research, probate records. We'll give them lots of choices, and we will take it all the way to completion as a one-stop.
Right. Yeah, and that makes sense, because different areas and different periods of architecture would have, different treatments and different options that you can offer.
Right.
Yeah.
And we don't have a particular style.
Right.
Do what's important and necessary for the client. So we are entirely client driven.
Yeah. And that makes sense, especially being custom like that. And that's where you have to be. Yeah. You're not creating something and saying you need to buy this. You're matching what the project is.
Right.
So you mentioned somebody coming to you with like a piece of fabric. Is that how you find your historic patterns, or do you have historic pattern books too?
Yes. I collect historic textiles. I was a curator in a museum, and I have studied historic textiles for the past 40 years. So most museums are very happy to have me come in and look at their collections. I'm capable of looking at a piece of cloth, doing the microscopy to find out what it's made of,
Mm-hmm.
recreating the weave structure. But we also have lots of ephemera from weavers. Weavers kept records, and weavers' draft books, both manuscripts and published sources. I can read a weaver's draft, and I can create a fabric that hasn't been seen in 200 years. And that's my forte. I have that ability. That's my training. And that's what makes this business a little bit unique. Not everybody can do that.
No, I agree with that. And I think that's an important service, because if the things that people use every day are a little bit harder to always have something that's 200 years old. So because they get used and they get thrown away, and people are like, oh, I don't want to keep that old stuff. And it's less, I guess there are some things that are durable, but if it's in regular usage, it makes it harder.
And beyond a certain point, all natural fibers are weaker and break down.
Yeah.
And if you have a historic piece, what you want is to reproduce it and not use it.
Right. That
Yeah.
very, very true. So do you have any notable projects?
Oh, we've had the luxury of having some incredible projects in our life. I will tell you about one we just finished, which is the Speaker of the House of Representatives chair.
Oh, very.
Yeah.
That's very exciting.
So there are 8 chairs in the set,
Mm-hmm.
and we actually had to create from photographs, which is always an interesting thing, a fabric that doesn't exist anymore for the Speaker of the House of Representatives. So that was pretty neat. But we're working on Hyde Hall, which is in Cooperstown, New York.
Mm-hmm.
And it is a Regency mansion, one of the few that are west of Albany for that period of time, built between 1817 and 1832. And we have done a lot of work for it already, but we're now working on the dining room drapery, which is pretty amazing. We have surviving textiles, and we can copy those. And to be able to do that is just like
so exciting.
Right. We've worked for almost all the dead presidents.
Okay.
So we've done something for Washington, Jefferson, John Adams, Van Buren. You name the dead president, and we've probably done something. We also do a lot of film work. So we did the John Adams series. We've done Road to Perdition. We also just worked on the Star Spangled Banner.
Oh, did you?
Extravaganza by David Copperfield. If you Google the Flag Day for this past year, 2019, he did a fun thing at the Smithsonian, and we got to reproduce the Star Spangled Banner.
Oh, yeah, that's
yeah. So I mean, we get to work on these really, really cool things. But any project by any person who has an interest becomes a really good project.
I agree.
And they're all outrageously fun.
So I think I mentioned when we were kind of preparing for our interview that I had sat through one of your seminars at the Greater Philadelphia Historic Home Show several years ago. And I said that one thing that I learned is like the drapery was supposed to cover the woodwork, which I never realized that. So do you have any tips for our listeners, that maybe something else that they might not know, that is like an inside?
Sure. And I guess what I'd say is I have two sort of different things to
Mm-hmm.
say. One is people who live in their homes should make their homes what they want them to be, and not be constrained entirely by feeling that they have to be a museum and it has to be absolutely perfect right, because we don't know what right is.
Right.
We can know style. I can tell you what the popular styles were, but that has nothing to do with taste, because no two houses were the same, no two windows are dressed the same. And the choice of color and trim and pattern is entirely up to the homeowner. So
Right.
they breathe a sigh of relief that they don't have to hold to a silly standard just because they saw it in a museum. It has to look like that.
Well, yeah, and I
style, but it doesn't have to look that same way.
Right. And I think sometimes people do get caught up in that, well, this is how it should be. But people are the same, 200 years ago, and people had different styles and tastes. Not every, yeah, you're right. You walked into different houses. Everybody had different,
right.
Yeah.
Right. And part of why I started my business, part of what my intent was when I would go visit historic houses and museums, which I did very frequently. I'd walk in and I'd see Scalamandre, Brunswick and Fee, Prell, and Tassinari. And I could say, oh, I saw that in this house, and I saw that in that house, and I saw that. And there was a very limited number of textiles that were actually being reproduced, because it was easy for those companies to do thousands of yards and sell them to 20 different historic sites.
Oh, yeah.
And my whole point was, each site should be specific to the area, specific to the inventories and probate records, specific to things we can actually document, and they should all look different. You shouldn't walk into Hyde Hall and see something that's at Colonial Williamsburg.
I agree. Yeah.
And that's why we are short order gourmet cooks. That's what
well, and there were so many differences regionally too.
Absolutely.
It doesn't make sense to just say, okay, everything's going to be the same. I agree, and I appreciate that. I appreciate that you saw that need.
There's also that big change between what's vernacular. Just pick it up and hang up. A different between vernacular styles, which are sort of the things that people do themselves.
Right.
And there's high style. And let's face it, 90% of the people do vernacular things, and shouldn't be doing what only the Vanderbilts or the Newport crowd or the, whoever did in an urban environment.
Yes. Yeah, I agree.
Relax.
I think that is good advice. So do you, I saw on your website that you have several publications and lectures, and I know we talked about a lot of a lot of the lectures are being canceled right now because of the social distancing. But do you, can you tell me about some of your publications and lectures, and are they available on your website?
Well, the publications that we do, I run something called the Textile History Forum, and it meets every couple of years and publishes papers. And yes, those are published, and I have copies of them here, and people can get them. And they're very interesting. They're very diverse, and they're online in terms of, you can order a year that I still have some copies. I'm at this point starting to Skype and Zoom lectures for weavers guilds and other groups, which I've never done before. Technology is a good thing,
right?
Sometimes. But I'm also working on my book on identifying and dating everyday textiles in America from 1650 to 1840, and that's getting closer to actually being a book. Sort of given me more opportunity. But people can always contact me. One of the things I've done, I've been researching historic textiles for 40 years. I have it all digitized. And if
Oh,
people,
that's very forward
raw
thinking.
data, it's just raw data. It's newspaper articles, weavers advertisements,
Mhm.
inventories, probate records. It's everything that I have collected as research. And if you send me a thumb drive and $10, I'll put it on your thumb drive and you can do what you want with it. I don't want my research to just sit here
Right.
and do nothing. It's raw data though. I mean, there's no, I draw no conclusions. It's just data.
Yeah. It's
It's
just the
interesting data.
information.
Yeah, it's just interesting data.
Yeah. Yeah. But that's very forward thinking. So is there anything that we haven't talked about that you wanted to share that I missed in our
Um, I think probably, no. Oh, yeah. Well, we did talk a little bit about the fact that the trim on windows,
Oh,
the
yes.
woodwork sort of gets covered, right?
Mhm.
And think about, I know it's in many homes, it's quite decorative, but think about it as wearing lace underwear. That it should be maybe peeking out at times, but you sure don't want to go around with your fancy lingerie showing 100% of the time.
Just stick it out. Yeah.
Right. Window treatments are the formal gown that you
Right.
put on the window. And the woodwork, the architraves, really are the lingerie that occasionally you see a tiny bit of, but you shouldn't have it exposed. So most modern people put window treatments way too low,
Right.
and they put on the woodwork or inside the window.
Right.
And then
Right.
all this woodwork showing. And that's sort of, to me, in the same way that historically, men wouldn't be caught in their shirt sleeves. Maybe out in the field they would be, but they
Right.
would have their waistcoat or their vest or their jacket on. And you would, shirt sleeves are underclothing.
Yeah.
They're not, historically.
Yeah.
So you've got to think not 20th century. You have to really think historically if you're going to do a period installation.
Yeah. Yeah.
And the other thing is, oh, I'm sorry.
Oh no, go ahead.
The other thing is wall-to-wall carpeting. Carpet it up till the Civil War, really,
Yeah.
in parlors and halls and in bedrooms, even sometimes bedchambers, was wall-to-wall, woven in strips, sewn together, and tacked around the perimeter of the room.
Mhm.
Wool carpeting was sometimes rolled up in the summer and grass matting put down, and then the carpet reinstalled in the winter. But it's not area rugs.
Right.
And you put druggets or other pieces of carpet over the top in the walkways. You know how in museums they used to put plastic runners down
Yes.
when it was muddy? Well, people did that in the past, except they used other layers of carpet.
Right. To
on the-
protect so you didn't wear it out. Yeah.
Right. Carpet is really expensive.
Yeah.
So you'll see a wall-to-wall ingrain carpet with a Venetian carpet as a walkway.
Mhm.
And then the other thing are slip covers. Nobody would ever have their show furniture, the show cover on their upholstered furniture out there in public on a regular basis. They always have loose covers or what we call slip covers today until company came, and then you whisk that off. These beautiful show, but fabric was expensive. Still
Right.
expensive to us, but it was expensive, and people knew how to preserve it and protect it.
Right.
So-
It reminds me of people who don't let you in the good living room, and there's plastic on everything.
You don't go in. The kids don't play in the living room.
Right.
It still had slip covers.
Yes.
So yeah.
Well, very good. Well, thank you. Thank you very much for sharing your knowledge with us. How should our listeners contact you?
The best way is through our website. There's an email address there, and then if they have images to send me later, we can get in touch. But email works really well.
Okay.
And then I will tell you, our online store is terrible.
Okay.
But the two products that may make sense. One is our window treatment book, which has window treatments that we've done, and then a piece of appropriate fabric for whatever that window treatment is. So you can order those online. And then the other fun thing is we do a really big sample pack. It has 3 samples of every type of fabric, including carpet that we weave. And that's sort of a fun thing because it gives you a pretty good range of what we can do. Yeah. And it also gives you how to get better in touch with us and what we do for homeowners and what we do for designers.
Okay, very good. And I know you mentioned that you're starting a YouTube channel. So
yes.
Is that on your website also?
Not yet. But
okay.
It's the Textile History Forum collection.
Okay.
And what I'm doing is I'm just doing very brief little videos of my textile collection, which is mostly American coverlets, woven coverlets. But there are some bed hanging pieces and there are some clothing pieces. But I have this huge collection and I really want to share the historic information with as many people as care to. And it went live today. So
okay. Very
it's
good.
up there.
It's out in the world.
It's not meant to be particularly pretty or special. It's just, I have all these coverlets. I have all this information.
Yeah.
If people want it, I'm happy to share it. And that's, we're very good that way.
Yeah, that's how I feel about our knowledge too. I want to share it with as many people as we can so that, everybody can learn.
Job of it.
Yeah.
And you do these podcasts, which are wonderful.
Yes. Thank you.
Yeah.
Well, thank you for joining us today. Thank you for coming on. I appreciate your time.
Fun. And I'm very thrilled to be a part of your system.
Okay. So. Thank you.
Thanks for listening to the Practical Preservation Podcast. The resources discussed during this episode are on our website at practicalpreservationservices.com/podcast. If you received value from this episode and know someone else that will get value from it as well, please share it with them. Join us next week for another episode of the Practical Preservation Podcast. For more information on restoring your historic home, visit practicalpreservationservices.com.